This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, everyone. I'm Talia.
And I'm Tanya.
And together we are TNT Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast.
Hey, Talia.
Hi, Tanya. Hi, listeners.
How you doing today?
I'm doing fabulous.
Awesome. Are you ready for a new story today?
I am. But you know what, Tanya? I want to take a second to remind our listeners to follow and subscribe us. Hit that little button.
Wherever you listen to us.
Think of us as two little puppies. And you can like us, which would be lovely. Unless you don't like puppies. Then don't hit the like button. But like or follow us. It really helps.
I read a book for this episode today. It's called Dead Air by Beth, Bednar. On June 27th, 1995, a woman named Jodi Husentruit, who was a morning newscaster for a local television station in Mason City, Iowa, was awoken by the sound of her ringing telephone. It was 4 a.m., and on the other end of the phone was producer Amy Coons, who worked at the station, and it was KIMT. She had noticed that Jodi wasn't at the station. Jodi was supposed to arrive at 3 a.m. to get ready for the 6 a.m. broadcast.
That's awfully early.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. Jodi answered the phone and apologized for sleeping in and said she was on her way to the station. Jodi hurriedly got ready to leave. By 6 a.m., when Jodi still hadn't arrived at the station, Amy had to fill in for Jodi's spot on that morning newscast. By 7 a.m., Jodi still wasn't there. So her coworkers at the station got worried, and they called the Mason City police.
Was that unusual for her?
Yes, it was very unusual. Sleeping in and missing the 3 a.m. was not unusual. It did happen occasionally, but just not showing up was very unusual. Amy was really worried that maybe Jodi had fallen in her apartment or got hurt, like there was some reason why she didn't make it. So she asked the police to please go and do a welfare check. Police arrived to Jodi's apartment complex, which was called Key Apartments, at about 7:15 a.m. They believe that Jodi left her apartment that morning after receiving the call from Amy, but something happened to her before she could get in her car to go to work. Her car was still in the parking lot, and it was a brand new 1995 red convertible Mazda Miata.
Nice.
She loved that car.
I'm guessing she's single with no children.
She is single with no children. She is about 27. And around her car and in the parking lot, they found belongings that she was carrying that morning strewn about in a very wide area. They found a can of hairspray, earrings, Jodi's hairdryer, and a pair of red high-heel shoes that belonged to her.
Her hairdryer?
Yeah, I'm thinking that, I don't know why she would bring it to the station, but maybe she brought her own things to get ready. They also found at the scene drag marks. They believe that were made by whatever shoes Jodi was wearing. They think she was dragged into another vehicle, either unconscious or possibly even dead.
How far were the drag marks?
I'm not sure exactly how far away, but they were right in that vicinity. As they were processing the scene, they also found an unidentified partial bloody palm print on the hood of her car.
Bloody?
Bloody. And also Jodi's blood on the driver's side rearview mirror. Police speculate that Jodi may have put up a struggle and fought back, and she was somehow injured. They believe that whoever attacked Jodi had to have done so as she was attempting to unlock her driver's side door, because the police found her car key was bent, so they think she went to put the car key into the car lock, and as it was there was pressure. Either somebody grabbed her hand and laid a lot of pressure on it because the key was bent.
That's a tremendous amount of pressure.
Yes.
I can't even imagine what it would take to bend my key.
They also found an outline of Jodi's head on the black fabric of the roof of her car, because this is early morning and the morning dew has not burnt off yet in the sunlight. So they found like an outline of her head on the hood and they found an outline of her body against her car that was made by the dew.
So she was pressed against the car, probably.
Yes. So the first thing the police want to know is, are there any witnesses to what happened? And they're estimating this had to have happened somewhere around 4:20, 4:30 in the morning. Because Jodi would have left pretty much right away after that phone call.
Which is probably why she brought all, like, her hair dryer and all that. I bet
That's a good point.
Yeah, I bet there's probably not too many witnesses at 4:20.
No, there were no actual eyewitnesses, but there were people that gave accounts of either what they heard or what they saw, either immediately before or after the police speculate, like, what time the abduction took place. There was a female resident of an apartment that faced the entrance of Key Apartments, and Jodi's building also faced the entrance. So if you can imagine an apartment complex, you have the entrance, and it's all the apartments, their windows face the entrance. So this woman said she remembers overhearing two men talking to one another that were outside her open window. She said she wasn't able to make out the words they were saying. However, she thought it was quite strange that these two men were outside her bedroom window so early in the morning.
I would be completely freaked out
I
if
know.
there were two men outside my bedroom window at 4 in the morning.
I know, right? And she said that she heard two cars leaving the parking lot within minutes of one another right after this conversation, or right around the time of the conversation, and one had a really loud muffler. She said she heard one pull out onto the street that's outside the apartment complex and head north, and the other one headed south. And she said they seemed to be in a hurry. There was a man named Randy who was a self-professed fan of Jodi's, because she's on the TV every day, because in addition to doing the morning newscast, she also did the newscast at noon. He claimed to see a white van, and the van you should be picturing in your head is a creeper van.
Sounds just exactly like I was picturing in my head.
He said it was in the parking lot outside of Jodi's building the morning of her abduction. He said he saw it because he was supposedly driving by the apartment complex on his way to work, and he noticed that the van's parking lights were on.
So this guy doesn't live in the apartment complex. He's a fan of hers who
Knows-
drove by.
And knows where she lives. So, because of this eyewitness account and the fact that he was a fan of Jodi's, he was a person of interest to the police. As I can see on your face, he's a person
very
of interest.
interested.
He was thoroughly interviewed, and he did submit to a polygraph test, which he passed. But police still wonder even if there was a van or if it was just some story he made up. However, at least two other witnesses from that day mentioned seeing a white van in the neighborhood. Maybe not necessarily that day, but the week leading up. But the biggest reason the police were suspicious of Randy was that he said he was on his way to work, and he actually did not start work for 3 more hours when he said he saw the van. So police are like, why are you out supposedly going to work 3 hours before you need to be there?
And what'd he say?
He did not have an explanation for that. There was another witness that came to the police, was a woman that was jogging the morning of Jodi's disappearance. And this woman jogged every day.
At 4 in the morning?
At 4 in the morning.
No.
Yes.
No.
She was a diehard jogger.
Do not jog at 4 in the morning, ladies.
Never.
That's why we don't jog at all.
I don't jog at all.
For safety reasons.
I don't even jog on a treadmill, okay? Because it's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
She said she jogged the same route, which passed the Key Apartments every morning. The day before Jodi's disappearance, she said she had encountered something that frightened her. She said she saw a white guy who was about 30 talking to a black boy who was on a bicycle. And she said the kid looked to be about 11 or 13 years old.
But not 12?
No. Yeah.
I'm just pointing that out.
I know. He said the kid was on his bike, and he had like really long skinny legs, and that's why she remembers him. She did remember what the white guy looked like, because she said that he kind of looked like somebody that she knew, so his description stuck out in her mind. She said she was jogging by when the man noticed her, and he suddenly stopped talking to the boy, and they both stared at her. And as she jogged by, she said the boy started to follow her on his bike and followed her for several blocks. She said he seemed really aggressive in following her, even though he's a child.
Why didn't she confront him?
I don't know, because it's early morning, I guess, and maybe because she's a single woman, although he's a kid. But she said she finally got away from him by breaking into a Sprint and going down another street, and she lost him. Or he gave up interest. And this happened at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and the police think that it was probably a drug deal. That's just speculation. But this same jogger, the morning of Jodi's disappearance, which was June 27th, said she overslept by 5 minutes, which she never does.
This woman is amazing.
I know. I picture her in her mind. She's like a fit, and she's just fabulous, right? She believes that oversleeping was her guardian angel's way of protecting her for seeing something that maybe would cause her harm. Because she said, along that morning jog, things are exceptionally quiet. She said, usually there's a car or two that pass.
It has to be dark.
Yes, it's still dark. It's before dawn. But she said it's quiet. Nothing's happening.
Because everybody's sleeping.
As she's jogging, she's heading toward Key Apartments. And there's a 4-way stop sign before she gets to the apartment complex. She stops, and she's jogging in place because there's a car coming, and that car stops at the stop signs as well, and it's facing her. So she's jogging in place, waiting for the car to pass, and they're just sitting there. And she starts to grow uneasy because the car looks a lot like a car that had been harassing her over the past several weeks.
What does that mean?
She described that there was a car, the windows were dark, and she would be jogging and the car would come up alongside of her and keep the pace with her and just kind of harass her that way. Like, it just really unnerved her. So she's jogging in place, and finally, after a few moments, the car finally does go through the intersection and passes her. So she's like, okay. Now she's running, and she's passing the Key Apartments. And as she's approaching the entrance, a car with its headlights turned off comes barreling out of the entrance of the apartment complex, and the car was headed right in her direction as it turns out of the entrance. She described the car seemed to be in a great hurry, and she said she had to jump out of the way when the car passed her, otherwise it would have hit her. She was really frightened by this, and unfortunately, because she was so scared, she failed to get like a good description of the car. Like
it wasn't a van, though?
No, it was a car. And she just said it was probably a light color. That's really all she could give. And she said she never saw a white van that morning. There was a neighbor who lived across the hall from Jodi, and she said she saw a white van with 2 men inside of it that she did not recognize in the parking lot about a week prior to Jodi's abduction. On the day of her disappearance, she was on her way to work that morning when she realized she forgot something back at her apartment. So she returned to the building and she saw 2 men sitting in a van outside of her building. She says she remembers it vividly because she said the sight of the van outside of the building made her feel unsafe. And she felt so unsafe that she decided she was not even going to go back to her apartment to get the item that she forgot, and instead turned back around and went to work.
That's pretty much how I feel every time I see a van. For
Me
real.
too, me
I am
too.
scared to death in a parking lot to walk by a van.
I would never have I would have done exactly what she did, been like, okay, whatever I left behind was not important. She also had another thing to tell the police that I'm going to tell you a little bit about later. But just keep this neighbor across the hall in mind.
Neighbor number 1.
Yes.
We call her neighbor number 1.
Another neighbor, and I'm not sure where in relationship to Jodi's apartment this person lives, she said she was awakened by a scream. And she also heard a slamming sound, followed by a thump. And then a woman's very frightened voice crying out, quote, "No, John, don't," end quote. And then she heard nothing else.
No, John?
Yes, it should be noted that she's not positive the name was John, and said it could have been Don or Ron or Sean. But it was definitely something that sounded like that. A few other residents of the Key Apartments told police they also heard a scream or a woman calling for help around the time of Jodi's abduction, but nobody called the police.
So that's 2 separate people that heard the scream?
Yes.
And they reported at the same time?
Yes.
Was it around 4?
Yes. So that's all the witness accounts that I have. Let me tell you a little bit about Jodi. At the time of our story, she's about 27. She was born on June 5th, 1968, and her mother's name is Jane, and her father's name is Maurice. She was born in Long Prairie, Minnesota. She was the baby of the family and had 2 older sisters, Joanne, who was 18 years older than Jodi, and Jill, who was 5 years older than Jodi. Her father passed away from colon cancer when Jodi was 14, and because her sisters were so much older than her, she pretty much grew up as an only child. Her family adored her and described her as, quote, a bit of a ham, saying she was very extroverted and she made friends easily throughout her life. They also said she was a really determined girl, like her personality was very laser focused on goals. For example, when she was in the 6th grade, she told her family that she intended to win the state championship golf tournament when she was in high school. The best part is she actually did it.
Wow, good for her.
She was a member of her high school state championship golf team, and in 1985, she ranked 4th overall in the entire state of Minnesota.
I don't understand golf, but I respect it.
I respect it.
But I don't understand it.
I suck at it.
I've only ever gotten drunk when I golfed. Yeah, and each time I did, it was with you. But
in high school, she participated in tons of extracurricular activities. She was athletic. And when she went to college, she decided to study TV broadcasting and speech communications. Jodi's high school boyfriend, whose name is Tom, and he's actually a chiropractor now, they said in the book, they dated for 6 years before they broke up. He did an interview several years after Jodi's disappearance. He said Jodi was the type of person who expected a lot from other people, but not more than what she expected from herself. Another story about Jodi was when she was in college during the summer breaks, she worked as a bar cart girl and a cocktail waitress at a northern Minnesota resort. She worked there one summer with a childhood friend named Stacy, and Stacy said they would go out in the evenings and their goal was to not bring any money with them. So to have other people buy their drinks.
I did that too. She sounds so much like me. I like her.
I like her too. She sounded like she was a lot of fun. Both of the girls were attractive and they usually didn't have to buy their own drinks. They also encountered a lot of people who owned boats and would then invite them out on their boats a lot. Jodi loved this, and she viewed it as just harmless fun. And she would tell Stacy that meeting people could prove to be valuable.
That's true.
Like networking.
Absolutely.
In the future. Stacy gives an example of one evening she and Jodi went to a party that was attended by mostly older men. Stacy got bored and a little uncomfortable and wanted to leave. But Jodi was like, you need to stay because just think of all the networking opportunities and people that could help us with future job hunts.
No, not old men. No, I don't go there. That was not ever, no.
Her friends do say she was a little naive when it came to stuff like that. And her personality was so bubbly that sometimes you could maybe interpret it as flirting when she really didn't mean it. So I think she truly had the idea of being innocently like, these are networking opportunities as opposed to old men wanting to oogle the young girls, right?
Oh, yeah.
After college, her goal was to become a network newscaster. She didn't have much time for a boyfriend because she focused a lot of her energy on her career. And although she did not have a steady boyfriend, her friends said she did date a lot, but they insist she was not promiscuous. She just enjoyed the company of other people and she liked having a good time. She kept a journal where she would write down her goals, and she was also a very big fan of motivational speaker Anthony Robbins. In the spring of 1994, which was about a month before she turned 26, and it was the year prior to her disappearance, she had written down some goals she had for herself, so I'm going to let you know what they are. She wanted to make a salary of $100,000 a year by the time she was 28, and she also wanted to be the main anchor woman in a top 30 television market, which the station that she worked at the time of her disappearance was not in the top 30. She wrote in her journal she was going to accomplish this by staying committed, looking and feeling her best, exercising, and weighing 110 pounds. And at the time of her disappearance, she weighed about 120 pounds. She also wrote that she wanted to be like Paula Zahn.
I love Paula Zahn.
She idolized Paula Zahn.
She's got the best stories.
She does. And she needed to consult with an agent, and she didn't know how to do that. So that was one of her goals. The weekend before Jodi disappeared, she had quite the fun-filled time. The Saturday before she disappeared, which was June 24th, the weather was sunny and warm. Jodi and two of her girlfriends, Tammy and Ani, were invited to go on another friend's boat, and this friend's name was John Van Sice. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. But the girls went on John's boat to go water skiing. Jodi loved to water ski, so she was really excited to spend the day on the boat. Because she was so competitive, she had to be the best at everything, so she was really looking forward to perfecting her water skiing skills. John had brought his son Trent with them, so the five of them spent the day on the water. That evening, they all went to Iowa City and had dinner and did a little bar hopping, and they had planned to stay the evening in Iowa City at Trent's apartment and go out water skiing that next day. However, on Sunday, the weather forecast was for rain, so the group decided to pack up and go home early to Mason City. Before going home, though, the group stopped to visit another friend whose wife had shot a video. Jodi had had a surprise party that John hosted earlier that month, and they wanted to get a copy of the tape. That friend described John and Jodi as being, quote, lovey-dovey with one another that afternoon. Police aren't sure of everything that Jodi did that Sunday night, but they do know she went home, she made a final entry in her journal, and she talked on the telephone with one of her girlfriends in Minnesota who described Jodi as sounding worn out. So I'm thinking she had like a busy weekend. The day before she disappeared was a regular normal work day for her. She did the morning newscast, which meant she arrived at the news station at 3 a.m. And while she would also normally do the noon newscast, she instead headed to the Mason City Country Club to attend an annual golf outing put on by the Chamber of Commerce. She attended this event with her boss, Doug, but they did not play together in the same foursome. After golfing, Jodi stayed for social hour in a banquet they had that evening. No one knows for sure what time she left, but John Van Sice, her friend, said that after the golf outing, Jodi stopped by his place to watch the video from her surprise birthday party. And he said he was the last person to see her alive. I don't know how he knows this, but he volunteers this information to the police. That same evening, remember that neighbor I told you about?
Neighbor number one we called.
Yes,
her.
Neighbor number one, her. She heard that night a male voice yelling for Jodi to open up while he was banging on her apartment door.
What time was this?
I'm not sure exactly what time it was. It was in the evening. The neighbor described it as pounding on her door, and he was saying, Jodi, open up. I know you're in there. So police think this is somebody that Jodi knows because he knew her name, so he had to have known her. He ended up leaving without entering Jodi's apartment, and it's not known whether she was even home while this was happening.
But we know after that she was still alive for hours because she talked to Amy, the producer, right?
Yes. She talked to Amy at about 4 a.m. Police are also not sure whether her car was in the parking lot or if this person even knew what type of car she drove. But I'm going to tell you, police believe that Jodi had a male visitor that evening, one they believe she did invite inside her apartment. And they believe this because when they were searching her apartment the morning of her disappearance, they found her toilet seat was raised.
What?
They figured a single woman living alone would not leave her toilet seat raised, and the only person who would do something like that had to be male. So they don't know, did she have a male visitor? And if she did, whether he stayed the night? Was he the same person who attacked her? And if he wasn't, did he witness it?
If someone was going to attack her that stayed the night, why would they do it in a parking lot? That doesn't make any sense.
Because anybody could have seen it. Like, I would think that if somebody was going to attack her and he was already in her apartment...
You do it there.
Exactly. There's no way anybody would see it. But no one has ever come forward to say they were the man.
Okay, that's odd.
And it's never been confirmed, but police are convinced a guy was there that night. So Jodi was attending this golf outing, and when she got home, she called a friend in Mississippi. And this friend's name is Kelly. Kelly wasn't home that evening, and her husband answered the phone. This is at about 8 p.m. Kelly's husband answered the phone and said Kelly wasn't home, but if she returned at a decent time, he would have her call her. Kelly's husband said Jodi sounded really upbeat and happy on the phone, and she was telling him all about the weekend she had going water skiing. Kelly got home later than she expected and did not return Jodi's call, which is something, of course, that she regrets to this day. So the timeline is she goes to the golf outing all day. Supposedly, she goes to John Van Sice's house to view this video and is home by 8 p.m. We know for sure she's home by 8 p.m. and we know for sure she was at this golf outing.
And at some point, a man knocked on her door.
Yes.
According to neighbor number one.
According to neighbor number one. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the suspects or people of interest that the police have had.
Allegedly.
So John Van Sice, as I told you, was a friend of Jodi's. He was almost 50 when he met Jodi, who happened to be around 25 or 26 when they met. He was described as good-looking, rugged, athletic. He had sandy blonde hair, and he enjoyed quite a bit being a bachelor. He had moved to Mason City and met Jodi because he lived briefly at the Key Apartments. He had moved there after his divorce. And some of Jodi's friends think that she was attracted to John, and I don't mean in a sexual way. I mean like in a friendly way, because he's a little bit older than her, and she lost her dad when she was young. So it's possible being with an older man made her feel safe. Their friendship developed sometime in the fall or winter of 1994 or 95. Her friend said she viewed the friendship as platonic, but there are people who have said that John wasn't satisfied with this. One of them was a bartender at a bar called The Other Place. Jodi and John would frequent this place. They were regulars.
How often did those two go out?
The way it made it sound was Jodi went to The Other Place several times a week, like after work or for dinner or whatever. And John was there all the time. So I'm thinking they saw each other constantly.
But they didn't necessarily go there together.
No. And the bartender, whose name is Lainey, she said that she noticed that John wanted more from the relationship. He definitely wanted a romantic relationship with Jodi. Her friends asked her about John, and Jodi said she had discussions with John about his feelings for her, and that she had told him and made it clear that they were just friends, supposedly. One strange thing that I thought about John was that he named his boat after Jodi. And he bought this boat.
Seriously?
He bought this boat right before the summer season of 1995.
He named a boat after her?
Mm-hmm. And her friends are like, wouldn't you feel weird about it? But they said Jodi did not feel weird about it.
I feel weird about it.
I feel weird about it. So
was it just called Jodi?
It was called Jodi. She spent a lot of time on it. So the police wonder how she really felt about the boat being named after her.
Not too bad if she spent a lot of time on it.
And she spent a lot of time with John on it, so maybe it just wasn't strange to her. And I will mention that Lainey, who was the bartender at the other place that they frequented all the time, said that she never saw Jodi or John kiss in public or do anything romantic, touch each other inappropriately or anything like that. John was a person of interest, obviously, as I mentioned, in Jodi's case, but several years prior to her disappearance, he was a person of interest in another murder.
What?
That I'm going to tell you about in a second.
Okay, all right. That's a bombshell. He did it. Allegedly.
John also did not have like a clean record. He had some DUI offenses and some traffic violations. He had his license revoked. Nothing violent, though.
Except this murder that you're going to tell me about.
And the funny thing is, though, he's never been arrested in Jodi's case, and he did submit to several lie detector tests that he passed. A few months before Jodi disappeared, a person they knew from the other place was also found murdered in his house, and I'm going to tell you about him in a few minutes. So John has these connections to things that are strange happening to other people, like people firsthand that he knew. Jodi had told her friends that John had an anger problem, and she told at least one friend she was going to end her friendship with John due to his temper. She described being intimidated and fearful of his temper.
Oh, shit! I just realized, okay, John is the name neighbor number one. said. I just put that together in my head.
I was waiting for you to pick up on that.
I don't know why I was so slow at that. I'm sorry. Damn. Okay.
Jodi said she witnessed firsthand John's temper because he was trying to get the boat on the trailer one day and he was having no luck. So he was cursing and yelling and his face turned purple, and that really scared Jodi. She told that same friend that she had told that she was going to end the friendship with John, that she was scared of his reaction if she tried to break things off with him. So remember I mentioned that surprise party for Jodi that John hosted? It happened on June 10th, that same month that Jodi disappeared. John rented out a restaurant, and it was a complete surprise to Jodi. She loved being the center of attention. She had a great time at this party. The invitees were Jodi's friends and colleagues and some of John's colleagues. John was glued to Jodi's side that whole night.
Because John wants Jodi.
He totally does. People at the party said he never left her side that night, and they also said that Jodi was dirty dancing with John.
Jodi.
So I'm not sure how to feel. She drank quite a bit at this party too, so much so that she gave her keys to a friend. This friend left though without leaving Jodi's keys, so at 3 a.m., Jodi and John are still at the restaurant parking lot. Jodi's sitting in the car with John. They're waiting for this friend to bring Jodi's keys back. As they're waiting, John offered to let Jodi, just come to my apartment and spend the night. He said, you can sleep in my bed, and I won't touch you. I'll sleep on the couch. Nobody knows exactly what happened that night, but Jodi told one of her friends, who prefers not to be identified, as many people are in this story, that Jodi had told her that John had almost, quote, date raped her in his apartment that night.
I saw that coming. Because she was drunk. And no, not blaming her.
No.
You know, but he thought to himself, he could take advantage of her.
And her friends do say she probably had mixed feelings about him because she's spending a lot of time with him. He's spending a lot of money on her. But he has this temper, and she's conflicted. Police also wonder if he helped her get the loan for that Mazda Miata. Because no one, and I don't know why, because it's been almost 25 years, no one is sure how she could afford that car on her salary.
Don't they have paperwork?
I know, that's what I keep thinking, but in bank records and
title?
things, they think maybe her mom helped her, but then they say, well, maybe John helped her. So are you ready for me to tell you about more suspects?
Are there more?
There's more.
Because I'm kind of sold on John.
There are more.
I already know what you're going to do. You got this twinkle in your eye.
You know it. I know it. The listeners know it. It's time for a shameless plug.
Hey everyone, if you go to our website, tntcrimes.com, you can find full unreleased episodes available for individual purchase. You can also join our membership where you get unlimited access to all of our unreleased episodes and early releases, mini episodes, and so many other awesome things. So go to tntcrimes.com. And thanks again for all your support. I hope you enjoyed that infomercial.
I love our infomercial. So I'll tell you a few more suspects. One is a possible stalker that Jodi had, an unidentified person. In the weeks heading up to her abduction, Jodi had told several people she was convinced that someone was stalking her.
I'm not surprised because, so everybody knows, during the commercial break, Tanya showed me a picture, and Jodi's super cute.
She really is super cute, and she's in the public eye. She's on TV all the time, and sometimes people think they know her. She even requested a police escort to accompany her to work sometimes in the morning. And in one conversation Jodi had with her sister Joanne, she was talking about the stalker, and she was really upset, and she was crying. So Joanne said Jodi was really afraid. There was a drug dealer that came up during the investigation.
The one on the sidewalk that you were...
No.
No, different one.
This is a different one.
Where the hell is she living?
In Iowa, apparently there was a huge meth problem at the time of her disappearance. I don't know if they still have a meth problem.
Everybody has a meth problem.
And at the time, there was a drug dealer. His name was Dustin. And currently, Dustin is serving time on death row right now for unrelated murders. That sometimes people wonder if he had something to do with Jodi's disappearance.
Why? Just because he killed other people?
Well, it went into it in the book. And they thought, okay, John's affording this lifestyle. Maybe he has something to do with illegal drugs. Nothing's been proven. So they say that is maybe a possible connection. And how they connect Jodi to it is that she would report the news on this drug dealer. They have no concrete proof that Jodi ever met this person. And she also was not an investigative reporter. So it's not like she was digging around. This drug dealer killed people who were witnesses to something else that he did. He killed witnesses during a trial that he had. So he's kind of a badass guy. And they connect, they say, well, it's kind of a thin theory because Jodi was never an investigative reporter. She just strictly reported the news, but that's just something that came up during the investigation.
So basically, he killed other people, so maybe he killed Jodi. That's the connection I'm getting from you?
Yes, and the connection is that she reported the stories about him.
I think we should go back to John.
One final suspect I'm going to tell you about is named Tony Dewan Jackson. In 1998, he was convicted as a serial rapist. He carried a rape kit with him that had handcuffs, a mask, a gun, and duct tape. And he came to the attention of the Mason City Police when he bragged to another inmate about being involved in Jodi's disappearance.
Really?
At the time she disappeared, he lived in downtown Mason City, only a few blocks from KIMT. He's referred to as the rapping inmate because in 1999, he wrote a rap song with lyrics that seemed to be about Jodi. Okay, I have the lyrics.
Are you going to rap it for us?
Of course not, because I can't rap.
I would pay to hear that.
The lyrics were, he said, she's a stiffin' around tiffin in a pillage of sillage in a by-low low below. So that led police to search a silo that was in Tiffin, Iowa.
Must be some secret code I'm not getting, but...
Exactly. That's why I didn't rap it. Give me a beat. No.
Only the members get to hear the rap version of Tanya's Stiffin' and Tiffin.
Police did search it. Never found anything. After they did this investigating, though, police said he's not really a viable suspect anymore. And just as a side note, he is incarcerated currently in a maximum security prison in Minnesota for raping 4 women in 18 days in Minnesota.
Did he prowl the streets? How did he get his victims?
Police said his MO was usually early morning attacks.
Interesting.
And they grew more violent as he went along. But these happened in 1997, the ones that he was arrested for. Now I'm going to go back to John.
Thank you.
I'm going to tell you what John did the morning of Jodi's disappearance. Before police received the call from KIMT to check on Jodi, which was around 7 a.m., John told a friend of his who he usually walked with every morning that he couldn't make it. He didn't give a reason why. And later on that morning, at about 7 a.m., he ran into a friend at a store and told him, quote, Jodi is gone. He said to that friend that Jodi did not show up for work and said to the friend, we have to get over to Jodi's apartment.
Did someone call him?
Nobody's called him because this is even before the police know. The only people who know are the people at the station that Jodi hasn't come to work. He never made it clear how he knew she never got to work. Because, like I said, at this point, police are only starting to investigate what happened. John and his friend ended up going to Key Apartments a little later while police were processing the scene. And people that were there described John as being very pale with shock, and he was rambling in his conversations. Police asked him his name, and he couldn't remember his last name. And then when they asked him what he was doing there, he said he wanted to find out when Jodi was going to be able to go water skiing with him next, which also seems strange because he knew Jodi had to be at work in the morning. And it was a weekday.
She wasn't supposed to be at the apartment.
Correct. John then told the police he was the last person to see Jodi the night before, so this is when he offers up that information. He said Jodi was at his apartment watching the surprise video with him. He said the last time he saw her, she was outside the apartment on the staircase, smiling up at him, waving. She was leaving. So police asked him, well, what time was this? First he said it was midnight. Then he said it was 11. And then he said, well, maybe it was 9 p.m. But we know Jodi was at her apartment making a phone call at 8 p.m. So I don't know if he just made this up, that Jodi stopped at his apartment after the golf outing, or if he's lying about the time. Police asked John what the nature of his relationship was with Jodi, and he said he was like a father to her. But people that knew them said that he had romantic feelings for Jodi. He lied to the police about that. The friends also said never did they think it was like a father-daughter relationship. Before John left the Key Apartments, he ran into Lainey, who was the bartender at the bar that him and Jodi were regulars at. Lainey said that she's with John at the apartment complex. They're standing outside. He repeatedly is asking, why did they do this to me? Why did they do this to me? And she said he seems really agitated. She doesn't know what he was referring to. Lainey didn't want to stay at the apartment complex because they were searching a nearby river, and she just didn't want to be there in case they found something. So she and John left together because she said she did not want to leave John alone. They drove around town for a little bit, and he invited her to his apartment. They spent the whole day together. While she doesn't say what she thinks about Jodi's disappearance or who she thinks is responsible, that day she was at John's apartment. She stayed there through the evening. She called her mom and said that if anything happened to her, that she was at John's apartment. She ended up spending the night there, and they watched the surprise video of Jodi. Early that next morning, Lainey said John woke her up very early and said he had to get to work, so she needed to get home. He took her home in his personal car and not in his work van, which she again thought was strange because she thought, why is he not using his van?
What color is his van?
I don't know. I bet you it's a white van.
I was just thinking that.
So remember I told you there was another person that John was connected to that died under weird circumstances? There were a few people, so I'm going to tell you about them. One person was another regular that would come to the other place and that would talk to Jodi a lot. He was a man that was about 43, and Lainey described John and this other man whose name is Bill. John and Bill would be like peacocks showing off for Jodi, like vying for her attention. As an example, Lainey said like Bill would tell a story and John was there with a bigger and better and funnier story to anything that Bill told. On April 4th, 1995, Bill didn't show up to the bar as he normally did every afternoon. And this is maybe about 2 or 3 months before Jodi disappeared. Lainey thought, well, maybe he just had other plans. But 2 days later, his body was found face down in a semi-fetal position in his dining room. He was fully clothed in his usual workday apparel, and his glasses were still on his face. He had been shot in the chest near his right nipple. There was an exit wound below his right shoulder blade in the back, and the exit wound was smaller than the entrance wound, which apparently is weird.
I don't know much about exit and entry wounds.
I don't either, and I don't know the significance of it, but I'm just putting it out there. At first, his death was ruled a suicide, but his family and friends didn't believe for 1 second. So they laid the pressure on the medical examiner's office, and his death ended up being changed to undetermined on his death certificate. He was shot with a gun that he owned, which was a .44 Magnum, and it was found on the floor about 2 feet away from his body. The bullet wound on Bill's body did not have any burning or blistering of his skin, which would appear if the nozzle had been laid against his chest. And also, since it's a .44 Magnum, if he had shot himself, the gun would have blown further away because of its caliber. It's such a strong gun. So it's not believed that it would only be within 2 feet of his body, that they probably would have found it much farther. But no one has ever been held responsible for Bill's death. The case that John was a person of interest in happened in Iowa in 1983. There were 2 people. Stephen, who was 20, and his girlfriend Melissa, who was 17. They lived on a ranch in Jasper County, Iowa. Steve was a ranch hand there, and on March 3rd, 1983, one of Steve's friends and coworkers named Jeff found Steve's body on the ground outside of the trailer. He was wearing blue jeans, and he was face down, covered in blood in the snow. He was pretty much unrecognizable because someone had beaten him in the head and face. Jeff went inside the trailer and found blood everywhere. He found Melissa's nude body on the kitchen table. It appeared that she had been dragged from the bedroom and killed in the kitchen and had similar head injuries like Steve, but there was no sign of sexual assault. The Jasper County Police believe the attack on Steve and Melissa happened sometime that prior night, sometime after 10 p.m. There was no sign of forced entry, so they think it had to have been someone that Steve and Melissa knew. So John fits into the story because he lived near the ranch and worked as a part-time ranch hand on the ranch with Steve. And they speculate that John was involved with Steve's estranged wife, and that would have been his motive for killing Steve and Melissa. It all seems very thin to me.
But still, Tanya, I mean, I'm not connected to any murders. You're not, I'm assuming.
No, and that morning when he's at Jodi's apartment complex, John was overheard saying, "I'm really sweating this because I'm already under investigation for a double homicide in Newton, Iowa."
How many homicide investigations are you a person of interest in?
Let me think. 0?
Me too.
Police speculate that possible motives that John had for abducting and possibly killing Jodi were: 1, Jodi did not reciprocate the feelings that John had for her. 2, he was possibly jealous because Jodi was very warm and friendly to everyone she met. 3, he was afraid that she knew too much about him. Either maybe he was involved in something illegal, like with the drug dealer, I'm not sure, or he was afraid that she was going to report him to the police due to the alleged date rape. And 4, there may have been people that he knew that wanted to keep Jodi quiet because she was a newscaster, and they didn't want her digging into their illegal activities, like I told you about the drug dealer. But like I said, she wasn't an investigative reporter, so I think that's really a very unlikely scenario. So I'm not sure, my personal opinion, what happened to Jodi.
Well, we need to solve this today. So I'm going to give you my theory.
Okay, what's your theory?
And I only know what you've told me. My theory is that John was pretty much at the point where he needed this relationship to go further and kept pushing Jodi. And eventually she said, okay, no, it's official. I am not interested in you, kind of a thing. And I believe he probably came to her house under the ruse of, let's watch a surprise video. Maybe he had it and she didn't open the door and he started getting mad. Then he went back home. He knows her routine. He was seething. And it was one of those, if I can't have you, no one can. But I know nothing more than what you told me today. But that's my guess. Allegedly, that's what happened.
I would have to agree that it had to be somebody she knew. Because I don't think this was random.
No.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning. And yes, Tony Jackson trolled for victims early in the morning, but I just have a really hard time thinking it was random. That it had to have been somebody she knew. Whether it was John or a creepy stalker, maybe she met him, at the other place. She was friendly with a lot of people. She might have met somebody that then took the kind words that she said to him and turned it all into they were going to get married next week, and maybe he knew her routine. So John is very suspicious to me, though.
It was John. It was John, Tanya. Allegedly. Let's just go over this one more time. How many murders are you a person of interest in, Tanya?
0.
Okay. How many is John?
A lot.
Okay.
At least 3 or 4 that we know of.
4.
John is a very strong
What is John doing?
Suspect.
Yes. What is John doing today?
John's just living his life. Because police cannot find any evidence.
Well, I apologize to John if he didn't do it. But I think he did. I think you did, John. I'm sorry if you didn't.
And I was going to end this by saying there is a tree planted in honor of Jodi at the entrance to the KIMT building with a plaque that says her name, and it's got a television camera and a microphone, and it says, always remembered.
Oh, that's nice.
And we're coming up on the 25th anniversary because it happened in 1995. And I just hope some way, somehow, her family gets some kind of closure from this. Because it is still a big story in Iowa and Minnesota. Like around the anniversary, the newscasts always have a feature story about it. And it would be nice that her family got some closure.
I wonder where her body is.
Yeah, they've never found her body.
But John had a boat.
John had a boat, absolutely.
And I've learned how you can sink a body by doing these podcasts. But I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to give any tips today.
Yeah, no tips, so.
Thank you, Tanya, for that. I had heard about the case, but I didn't know the details, so that's why I was very much looking forward to the story.
I'd never heard about this one. I don't know how I missed it.
There's a lot of them, that's why.
Yes,
that's how.
That is very true, and I'm sorry to everyone who hates unsolved mysteries.
I do, too. That's why I solved it today. It's solved, because I hate unsolved mysteries.
I do, too. I want to know what happened.
Well, we have a good idea.
Yes.
Now, we could be wrong. But we're not.
And usually women are killed by someone they know. I mean, the statistics work against John. But allegedly, supposedly.
So I want to thank every single person out there that has taken the time to listen to this great story today. We really appreciate you. Again, if you guys could subscribe and follow us, you'll get a notification next week when we have a new one. We also have a whole bunch of episodes on our members only that can be purchased online. Members get access to our live episodes exclusive for members and lots of other good things. Like,
there are lots of episode extras.
Yes, exactly. Bonuses for each episode, including information we've gotten from the courts of videos and interrogations and all these other great things. So become a member.
Until next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.